When I first started running, I still remember like 5 miles was a huge accomplishment. You know, the first time I ran 5 miles and then the first time I ran 8 miles. It was this incredible thing that I just didn't think that I would ever be able to do. And then when I started running ultras, it was, you know, each new distance, it was just incredible to be like, wow, my body is capable of that? Like, really? I can do that. So I think the cool thing about ultras is just watching people who previously thought that they couldn't do something realize that they can, that if you train and if you want it badly enough, that you will be able to accomplish the goals. If you can, you should.
Hey, what's up, Trails Collective? This is Ian Golden and Ellie Pell here with your weekly rundown for June 24th, 2020. So for those of us who've been, those of you out there rather, have been following along since we started this a few months ago, you get what's coming in these episodes. For those maybe just tuning in for the first time, our hope as one part of the larger Trails Collective is to just give you a rundown of what's been happening in our region this past week and maybe of the week ahead. So Ellie will break down some of the media that's out there, whether it be pod or video casts, and give the opportunity to get the gist and then see whether you can go in and listen to the full episodes on your own. And I'll give you a rundown of, I guess amongst other things, maybe what might be happening or shaking on some message boards, what's happening in terms of events. And this year, particularly with events being out the window, at least so far, turned a bit of the focus toward FKTs. And this is part of the larger Trails Collective site, which really just looks to bring together the various components of trail running and community. From a master events calendar, which for this year, in terms of how much that's worth at the moment, but the weekly rundown, we'll do some gear reviews, and we're still getting synced with how that'll go, and a steady pace of reviews coming in. We'll have a resource, basically bank, where if you're a coach, a photographer, a therapist, whatever, go in there and plug yourself in, so that those of us who may be looking for those entities in our region can find one that's relatively local. We have a community message board, which you can hop on and maybe replace something like Facebook for those of us who don't necessarily want to be tied to making Zuckerberg all the profits. Hop on there and connect that way. So there's a bunch of different pieces to the Trails Collective. Check it out when you get a chance. So this week we opened with a clip from Ron Herkins Jr. on his company or entity called Goat Factory Media. You've potentially heard me mention it before, but Ron's done quite a bit of photography work and some video work for some of my events over the years. He does also pretty exceptional work with weddings and particularly theater. So if you've got any needs or just want to check it out, check him out. But what he was providing a snapshot was something that Sheila and Eric Egan took on this past weekend. For those who don't know Sheila and Eric, they're based in Rochester. We're integral founding members of an entity called Trails Rock up in Rochester, and they have an event company called Trail Methods. This past weekend should have been the weekend for Many on the Jenny, which was their signature event, which is a 40-mile, beautiful 40-mile loop in Letchworth State Park in northwestern or upstate New York. And for those who also don't know, Eric's kind of battled some injuries to and from recovery, maybe getting injured again or not quite getting repaired or healed. And so it's been a long, I think, struggle for him to get back to a place where maybe he was prior. So with the event being out, he and Sheila committed to seeing if they could basically go from no running or zero to this 40-mile run and doing their own course over the course of just 8 weeks. So along the way, I think Eric shed maybe like 40-some pounds and really just built up. And it looks like they had a pretty beautiful weekend. But Ron's putting it together as part of season 2 for the Beast Coast film series. He did season 1, I think, a couple years ago or a few years ago. and is coming back at it now. So stay tuned for a longer, might be episode 1 of season 2 for the Beast Coast film series. So great job, Eric and Sheila, and to all of those who joined you. And then also just to mention, in terms of just the class act, which I just caught in the Finger Lakes Trail Conference mailer today, was even though that many in the Jenny didn't happen this year, those of you who were entrants that decided to donate or allow Trail Methods to keep your entry fees, they were still able to make a few $1,000 donation to the Finger Lakes Trail Conference and much needed trail work. So that's pretty amazing for an entity to do that, despite kind of being in the hole themselves and not being able to run this year. So thanks for that, Eric and Sheila and all those who allowed that to happen. So moving on, we're going to turn to this week without really still formal events running to the FKT or fastest known times kind of rundown, what some of those who are competitive out there are putting themselves out doing, but also just for those who aren't necessarily kind of that top tier competitive runner, just challenging themselves and getting out there. And again, a big thanks to the fastestknowntime.com, a website which I'm pulling this information from, and the logo behind me. And I also want to give a shout out on this topic to Jay Friedman with the Pain Cave and Gunks Runner. I think just yesterday, Monday the 21st, he put out episode number 62, which is Chasing FKTs with Ben Nephew. So for those of many of you, I think in the region will know who Ben is, but up until recently held the record for the most FKTs, I think, on the boards, or at least on this time. So I'm excited. I haven't listened to it yet, but I'm excited to listen to it. So let's get into it state by state and see what who was doing what out there. In Connecticut, Matthew Walker ran a 2 hours 9 minutes on the Cockaponset trail. Justin Kousky, who we've mentioned in several episodes now, shot back on the Saugatuck trail, reclaiming a mark he lowered earlier in the year, the third lowering in 2020, and his time, I think, taking a few minutes off of one just maybe from a month ago to 1:33. Cherie, Billbie, Jillian, Ellefson, Kelly, Catlin, and Mira, Skuka ran an 11:31 on the Nipmuck trail. And then Sarah Ports-Connor, who we've also mentioned, who's been on fire this year with FKTs, ran 58 minutes for the Ragged Mountain Loop. In Maine, Todd Reutlinger set the baseline mark of 13 hours, 21 minutes for the 65-mile Eastern Trail, which runs between Portland and Portsmouth, and which I imagine is a pretty beautiful trail. And that was a baseline mark which he set there. In New Hampshire, Sharon Knorr ran 5 hours, 37 minutes on the Mad River Notch Loop. This is covering 3 of New Hampshire's peaks, I think over 4,000 feet. It looks like it's probably an absolutely spectacular loop. And the namesake with the Mad River, one of my favorite trail shoes of all time, which was the 2019 Mad River TR from Saucony. And I'm looking forward to the TR2 or the version 2, which is going to release here in just a week or two. So looking forward to getting that on my foot. And we'll try to do a quick review as soon as I can get it. In New Jersey, Jonathan Wagar ran 4:16 on the Columbia Trail, and David Franz 4:09 on the Four Birds Trail. In New York, Michelle Merlis ran a 3:40 on the Wittenburg-Cornell-Slide loop. Also another one getting up into some of the higher peaks in New York. Would have been, I imagine, a pretty spectacular weekend for it. So nice work, Michelle. Kelly Macdonald, who we've mentioned a couple times prior, and who I believe is going to maybe share with us a few-minute clip here in one of the upcoming rundowns on just what she's been up to with FKTs and kind of what they've meant for her. 5:15 for the Winona State Forest circuit. Michael Jaworski, Paul Fraunhofer, Dan Fraunhofer, took 6 days, 5 hours for the Adirondack 46 High Peaks through hike variation. Impressively taking nearly a full day off of the previous record set in 2019. So so I guess a little bit different in configuration, and I'll still have to learn a bit more about it than some of those, including Jan Welford and some others who have set the different version or going after it on their own for the Adirondack High Peaks. But just a completely incredible circuit, whether it's the through hike or those who have gone after the run or kind of the speed record. And this is one that if it ends up panning out, Sarah Kais is hopefully going to go after in July, and hopefully we can be up there with her, or August rather. Connor Matheson ran 4:07 for the Suffern Bear Mountain Trail. In PA, Thomas Wanuski ran a 4:07 for the Wissahickon Green Ribbon Trail. In Virginia, Sheila Vibert ran a 26:59 on the AT through Shenandoah National Park. Nice work getting out there. Shenandoah, I think, just opened a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks ago at this point. So getting right after it. Nice work, Sheila. Pretty incredible effort. And that was something that had some roots and fans on the Virginia Happy Trails Facebook group. And then for Vermont, Grace Long ran a 7:59 for the Glastonbury West Ridge Loop. Taking you through some of what shook out in the media this week, Ellie
Hey,
Pell.
Trails Collective. Ellie here, checking in with your podcast and media info for the week. First, we're going to start out with the Connecticut Trail and Ultra podcast. They put out an episode with Amy Maurer. But first, they talked to Fred, one of the hosts of the show, about his recent 150 plus mile run across the diagonal way of Connecticut, because that's the longest way, and that's the way Fred has to go. It took him over 60 hours. He ran on highways, used gas stations for aid, and it actually kind of sounded like he enjoyed that. I don't know. But I did release an episode, which I'll talk about later, with Fred this past week. They then talked to Amy Maurer, who absolutely blew my mind. She just finished an 875 mile month and has a 200 mile, 48 hour finish to her name as well, which she ran on a track, I think it either Across the Years or Desert Solstice or one of those style events. And she prides herself on her ability to keep going and not slow down as much as everybody else. And we all know that's how you win the race. She spoke about addiction, eating disorders, and learning how to love her body. I really enjoyed this episode a lot, and what a great face for our East Coast trail running community. They then put out an episode in their Culture Personality series with Simon Edgett. Simon Edgett is resilient. He's persistent, and he got hit by a truck last December, so they were really afraid that they might lose Simon. It was that bad. Simon was actually out on a run when this happened, but because he's so healthy from running, he actually was able to come back sooner than everybody expected and really blew the minds of the doctors and PTs and therapists that he worked with. So welcome back, Simon, and I'm also glad you're in this community. Jay from the Pain Cave put out an episode with Yassine DeBoon. He says, in the midst of ongoing protests against police brutality and systemic inequality, the great Yassine DeBoon steps into the Pain Cave to discuss his experiences as a minority athlete in an overwhelmingly white majority sport. One of the most accomplished ultra runners in the U.S., Yassine brings us his unique perspective, growing up as the target of racism, how that has contributed to his struggles with addiction, barriers to minority participation in trail running, and what we can do to build a more tolerant, equitable community. Yassine also wrote a couple articles for Trail Runner Mag, and he talked to us last week on the rundown. He was also recently on the Ginger Runner. All great episodes with Yassine, and I really enjoyed learning a lot about his backstory and just the strange things that people of color have had to deal with that I never have. He mentioned something on the Ginger Runner about kids in school, if he accidentally touched them, they would, brush it off and say, ew, this guy touched me. And, first of all, I was like, how many people have said that to me? But then I was like, actually, Ellie, white privilege, it's a lot worse for those types of people. But in a limited experience, I know how much that sucks. And so, anyway, listen to the episode with Jay. It's great for perspective. Life is Trail Running put out a new trail video called Pac-Man Running. And then I want to reference some Trails Collective media that we put out this past week. I interviewed Chris Rowley. Chris was awesome, and the episode was so much fun. He just won the One for New York challenge, where he ran 100K in a little bit under 2.5 weeks. So Chris is an upstate New York native. He lived in Syracuse. He's run Cockaponset 50K a bunch of times. He has the course record at Green Lakes. And he recently moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, but he wanted to take part of this challenge because hometown pride. The last weekend of his challenge, I think he ran 100 miles in 2 days, which that sounds like a lot. Chris and I had a great time talking about his injury history and the mental fortitude that it takes to run 1,000K in about 2 weeks, how he structured his days, what was going on, and it's a really awesome episode and there's tons of information, so stay tuned. I also, on Monday, just released an episode with the aforementioned Fred Marolo. Excuse me, I will get that right at some point. I've been wanting to get this interview out since I interviewed him a couple months ago, but luckily the information in there and what we talk about is timeless. Fred has a running streak of over 14,000 days. He's been running this streak since before I was born. And just that fact alone just blows my mind. And we had a lot of fun talking about the different races he's done, how he gets up the day after a 100 miler and runs a mile, which actually he's like, technically he usually does it in 2 days. So like the end of the 100 miler is like his next day. So that was fun. And then also he shared a story at the end about what the most interesting run he ever had to do was. Involves Florida Keys and drinks. Pay attention to that one. And that's all I have for the media section this week. So back to you, Ian.
Events which would have run this upcoming week if it weren't the year of COVID. Also the intent, as I mentioned before, is part of the intent here is to open us up all to maybe events that just wouldn't have been on our radars prior. I know in both looking at the FKTs as well as just events that have been out there so far in my own, it's been pretty cool to learn of new and different events, and some which would end up being, I guess, on a relative bucket list. So what would have come this upcoming weekend, but all of these in this series or in this listing here canceled for 2020. The Twisted 10K put on by the Blue Ridge Trail Runners in Virginia. The Monster Brant Hill Challenge put on by the Rebellion Running in Elmira, New York. That was to be a 1 hour and a 3 hour timed run. Run for the Ages 10K Trail Chase, one put on by the Pagoda Pacers over the beautiful flowy trails of Nolde State Forest. There's some trails that I used to run a bit in high school, and I imagine that event would just really flow. So maybe someday I'd be able to get down there and check out the race. The Night Train 50K and half marathon, originally and historically run out of Farmville, Virginia. It uses a relatively newer, I think, and finished format, a historic rail trail, which passes through, I think, some pretty areas rooted in Civil War history. The state of things at the moment, hopefully in progressive fashion, I think just thinking of that Civil War history just, I think, carries a whole nother weight at the moment, at least for me. Feels like maybe that Civil War history is still very much, I think, alive right now. So I got to say that kind of sounds heavy. But imagine it's a pretty cool and beautiful event. And it was an event also, it was kind of neat that it starts at 5:30 p.m. and runs into the evening. For myself, I think that would sound kind of cool to see if I could chase and get in before nightfall. Midnight Squatchapalooza, probably one of the cooler named events here in any events I've looked at in a while. It was a timed event which was to be run in Burlington County Fairgrounds in Columbus, New Jersey. Another one mixing it up with night running. It starts at midnight, hence the name. So that would be, I don't know, pretty cool and different from most of our experiences in terms of daytime running. The Catamount Ultra, beautiful, non-technical very runnable trails in the Trapp Family Lodge outside of Stowe, Vermont. This one, I think, just has the historical and very, I don't know, it's got a pretty kind of timeless association in my head when I hear the Trapp Family Lodge. And I'm just kind of visualize these just kind of flowing, just beautiful hills. And it kind of looks like the course is a bit that. So if you need something like that for June of 2021, keep that on your radar. Ontario Summit, one that was going to happen a couple hours east of me in Naples, New York, put on by Goose Adventure Racing. That was an event they held out quite a bit in hopes of running, made some modifications, changed it to just, I think, a half marathon versus having a longer distance in the mix as well, but just didn't end up being in the cards with all the COVID restrictions. Consider that for a beautiful half or full marathon option for your next June. And then one that arguably probably one of the toughest events mile for mile in the country, for sure in our region, which should have been this weekend with over 15,000 feet of gain in 54 miles. Manitou's Revenge. Charlie Gattle and Mike Sudi have created quite the gem with this one. And it's just raw and it's beautiful. It basically stitches together a section of the escarpment trail, Devil's Path in the middle, and then keeps going from there and it into what then becomes the Cat's Tail course. And so that allows you to get through the Cat's Tail, or the Catskills rather, the high peaks with those three together. But Manitou's Revenge, an absolute beast. Mountain Peak Fitness has some good videos over the years of Manitou's Revenge if you want to see a little bit what that's all about. But definitely check it out for 2021. May not be for everybody on how burly it is, but if it's not on your radar and if that sounds like you want burly, check it out. Events that have gone virtual for 2020 and still running. The Table Rock Trail Challenge is this Saturday the 27th. It's a last person standing event put on by Scott English and Salt City Running. It was originally to be run in Jamesville, New York. Now entrants are to put together their own 1.2 mile loop, and with each lap the time allotment is reduced until it's down to one. So good luck to the 62 entrants that are signed up for that one. Another one, the Berkshire Ultra Running Community for Service, or BERCS, has the Vegan Power 25K 50K. It was originally to be run on a 5-mile looping course outside of Pittsfield, Mass. Also looks like a really pretty course or pretty loop. And it'll be running this Saturday, also the 27th, in virtual format. And just taking a quote from them on kind of the community and what the event is celebrating. Race with us as we showcase some of the best plant-powered athletes around and learn how a plant-based diet slows climate change, preserves our ecosystem, decreases animal suffering, and supports a healthy lifestyle.
Yup, that's me. But you're wondering how I got myself in this bird brain scenario. And most of the details are a little foggy, but what I can tell you is that as a prize-winning poultry, you should probably pay attention to where people place the emphasis in the phrase, "We'd love to have you for dinner," especially around the holidays.
This year, all the profits are to go to support the Vine Sanctuary in Vermont. Registration is closed this past Saturday, I believe, and best of luck to 83 entrants registered to run virtual this weekend. Postponed to a later date in 2020, the Blue Mountain Wildlife Run, Run to the Rock rather, 2.5, 5, and 10K, put on in the Hamburg County Park in Pennsylvania, and their pushback date is still to be determined. And then unsure if they're running this weekend, Run for the Wounded 5K, 10K, and half marathon put on by Bishop's Events in Triangle, Virginia. The course is next to Quantico Marine Corps Base, and it's used as a benefit in part for the Wounded Warrior Project. It looks like it's still scheduled for this Saturday. It appears that registration is still open, despite being beyond their stated registration window. So check it out, Run for the Wounded race, Triangle, Virginia, if you're looking to get in and want to support the Wounded Warrior Project for this weekend. And then another event that is running this weekend is not a race per se. Part of my intent here is also to cue us into larger opportunities, whether it be other gatherings or group runs at stores or clinics, or in this case, events that are put on by the trails maintenance organizations. So this Saturday, the 27th at 9 a.m., the New York, New Jersey Trails Conference will put on a webinar entitled Invasive Species Strike Force. It teaches you to identify 6 of the biggest offending invasive species and how to best tell them to get the hell out of our trail networks. So check it out. I think I'll plug a link here in the show notes. New York, New Jersey Trails Conference. A lot of us runners probably take more advantage of the trails than for sure we give back in. So take a moment to check out this organization, as well as check out the event, as it's pretty worthy. And taking us out this week is a clip on a pretty fabulous new piece of gear. I'm not sure if we're going to carry this one on the shop unless somebody like Eric Kozak, an idiot runner, wants to start piecing these things together, because it's a pretty good idiot idea that we could use on the trail. But it probably should be in every trail runner's gear closet this year, particularly where our event aid station is going to be a little bit different in terms of resources on the table. But this was cued in to me by George Scott on the Virginia Happy Trails Running Club Facebook site. And again, very time appropriate given the day and age. So check it out, the gear that you need to get on now. Catch up with you next week. Thanks for tuning in this week, and check you later.